2015 was very much just in the Midwest, and what we're dealing with, it spread East Coast to West Coast. How did this virus get over here? I have not heard of any information that wild birds have been testing positive for it. So where did it come from? So many cases of high path AI. What more could we be doing to protect the food industry?
Welcome to Unplugged, the official podcast of the Poultry Science Association. This is the podcast where we strip away the fluff and get real about poultry science from bench to barn. I'm your host, Andy Vance, Executive Director of the Poultry Science Association. In this week's episode, we talk turkey, health challenges, and industry insights from a turkey industry professional. Joining us this week will be Dr. Carrie Cremers, a veterinarian, graduated with the University of Minnesota, and actually practiced dairy medicine in the state for 2 years prior to getting involved with broiler operations in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Alabama. Today, Dr. Cremers is involved with turkey health in a big picture scale at Jennie-O, a subsidiary of Hormel Foods. She's been there for 6 years as manager of technical services and animal welfare for the company, overseeing the technical aspects of breeders, hatcheries, grow out, research, and processing plant. In addition to her veterinary degree from the U of M, Dr. Cremers also graduated from the University of Georgia with a master's of avian health and medicine and successfully completed her board certification, becoming a diplomat with the American College of Poultry Veterinarians. Dr. Cremers, welcome to Unplugged. I want to dive right into this. There are a lot of things that I wanted to talk about with you because I think we have a number of challenges that are facing poultry health professionals generally, but oftentimes we maybe unintentionally overlook the turkey-specific aspects of some of these big issues that we're dealing with as poultry scientists and poultry health experts. Let's start big picture, 30,000-foot view for you as a turkey health expert. Have you seen differences in biosecurity or outbreak response between sectors as we have been dealing with this lingering issue of highly pathogenic avian influenza?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Looking at biosecurity wise with turkeys, I really think we've come a long way, even from looking back in 2015 when we had our big outbreak back then as well with high path AI. And looking at what we've done now, I think the turkey industry has really followed strict biosecurity protocols. And we've really implemented different tactics as we've learned more about how this virus is acting and just finding more out with epi investigations and just being boots on the ground, really trying to understand how this virus is getting into the barns or how it's spreading from farm to farm. I think that's one thing that shows that we've really improved on our biosecurity and we're doing a really good job is that we've limited that farm to farm spread. And it's really just those wild bird introductions and trying to figure out how to prevent that piece. So I do think that, we've really been working hard on our biosecurity and making sure to follow those correct steps to keep our birds safe.
You mentioned those wild birds. I want to pick apart that a little bit because and this is again coming from the outside looking in, but I'm sort of making some inferences that in a lot of ways the turkey industry, given where some of the geographic concentrations are, here in Minnesota as a relevant example, is maybe the tip of the sword in a lot of ways for looking at the spread of the virus through the flyways, the migratory bird patterns, and so on. Am I right in thinking that you guys in the turkey space might have that first exposure, if you will, or some of the first places where we can say, hey, here's what's happening with this particular outbreak or variant with regard to the wild birds? Is that a fair guess?
I would say yes, that especially looking at Minnesota, South Dakota, we've got a lot of wetlands and water and areas where those waterfowl can congregate and that high density of waterfowl to infect the birds and turkeys. I do think that it's interesting when we look through this outbreak of 2022 to now compared to even back in 2015 again. 2015 was very much just in the Midwest, and what we're dealing with this current outbreak, it spread, from East Coast to West Coast. Wetlands and the flyways have a lot to do with it, but it's definitely interesting in how it's not just in the Midwest anymore. And I think too interesting with this virus, we see the number of mammals that have been infected with this virus and the number of broilers that have also been infected. That wasn't what we saw back in 2015. And the number of backyard flocks that have also been positive with this outbreak compared to previous ones. It's just very different.
Yeah, I think and I'm glad you mentioned that the differences because one of the things I was hoping to learn from you is you compare this outbreak to that 2015 as an example, or things that you and your colleagues have picked up on even in the last 6 to 12 months. What are some of the things you think the turkey industry specifically has learned or is in the process of learning from the outbreak, and how then at the farm level, the production level, we're adapting almost in real time? What do you have for us that you'd like to share in terms of learnings and adaptations that the industry is making?
First of all, we keep doing the things that we know work and try to do them better. And I think there is such a thing as biosecurity burnout. So trying to, when we're dealing with this from years and, trying to keep people doing the biosecurity correctly, it gets to be a lot. And especially when you're operating at a high level, because again, this outbreak, it hasn't just been the traditional fall and spring. We've seen it throughout winter having positives, and positive cases, and even in the summer. So it kind of becomes a year-round thing now, working through as an industry how to keep people on the farm activated and engaged and understanding why biosecurity is so important has been a real big thing. I think we still have a lot more to understand, so we've done a really good job in limiting the spread from farm to farm, that lateral transmission. But how do we keep improving that first introduction now? That to me is the area that we still need to keep working on and understanding. And where is it? Is it aerosol spread? Is it through the mammals that are positive? Like, where is that coming into our barn, and how do we manage that and protect the birds?
I really, hadn't been thinking about this until you mentioned it, but I think that idea of biosecurity burnout or crisis fatigue is something we probably should talk more about broadly as a community. What are you seeing there when you talk to your production teams, your live operations teams, when you're down at the barn level? Is that something where they look at you and say, "Gosh, Carrie, I'm already doing everything I can do"? What's that feedback mechanism like between kind of the animal health research science community and the live production folks who are out there fighting the fires every day?
It's very similar to, like, my feedback that I've been given is very similar to what you first said, is we're doing everything we can. What more could we be doing? And trying to figure out where they can do more and how they can do more. And so that's kind of where we start to have, even within our own companies, trying to understand what more we could do, or can we do something different, and trying to do, almost on-farm research to see what we can improve upon or make a difference. And so I think there becomes more of the company or the on-farm research, and then trying to explain to academia or people who are doing research in the science field, where we're struggling or where we need help, or how to make changes that are going to impact the system. And sometimes we talk about research that's very broad, but how do we get it more specific to the farm and really make changes that are going to impact the outcome?
I'm thinking about some data that I've been looking at, and you probably have more access to more accurate or up to the minute, data internally. But I was seeing, I think it was a Farm Bureau analysis that was saying, we've had more than 14 million turkeys, affected by high path since 2022. USDA's latest livestock and poultry outlook production in 2024 forecast at more than 5 billion pounds, which was down 6.3% from the prior year. And so when we look at the reduction, in production that we could probably attribute to this, for you and your colleagues, like, put into context for the listener just how big of an issue this is for the turkey industry and a company like Genio, how this, has changed your conversations about the business, and what a priority this is for you and your colleagues.
Well, yeah, so, like, the information that I have is as of March 27th, there's the loss of more than 18.8 million turkeys. So, to your point, there's been a lot of turkey loss, and especially within this first quarter of 2025, that the turkey industry in the US has really been impacted. And so I think that starts, to have conversations on understanding the risk of a farm going positive within your operation. And obviously, there's the loss of the birds themselves when you have to depopulate from a high pathogen case, but then you also now have shortage of birds to the processing plant, and you're shorting your customers. So it's a very wide impact for the company itself, for that individual farmer, and then, also for the consumer in the end if they're not, if you're not able to get the product that you're looking for. Having those conversations, I think that's kind of a big part too of dealing with high path AI for this long is that, there's been a lot more conversation on vaccines for high path AI and what does that look like, and really trying to see what else out there is an option to try to control high path AI. Because again, like we've said, we've really limited the lateral spread and working on biosecurity and doing what we can, but just obviously still dealing with so many cases of high path AI. What more could we be doing to protect
Mhm.
our birds and, the food industry?
In an earlier episode of the podcast, we talked with Craig Rolls, who's a veterinarian as well, but in the egg space, and raised this issue of vaccine and that maybe is a tool we need to talk more about in the toolbox. One tool. Obviously, there are a lot of concerns from the broiler side about the implications for global trade, given some of the barriers in place to countries that choose to use vaccination as a strategy. What are some of the discussions that you and your colleagues in the turkey space are having with regard to, or concerns that you might have, if any, about incorporating vaccine as part of our overall response strategy?
Yeah, so through the National Turkey Federation, NTF, we really have a lot of conversations on vaccines, and NTF has been strongly encouraging USDA to keep looking at vaccines and renegotiating with trade partners so that we can make it a feasible option for all involved and not, hurt anybody's business for exporting product. I think that as we look at vaccine and kind of what we're learning from different countries vaccinating for high path AI, we're learning from them using the vaccine. And I think some of the challenges would be, having to handle each bird and inject it. So like there would be things we'd obviously have to work through with handling birds and the surveillance testing and, whatever else we would need to do to ensure our trading partners that, we're providing them safe product. Those are opportunities and questions that would be a really good option going forward to work with both, USDA, industry partners, government officials, and really just working together to communicate on what can we do, what could we do, and just working together to create an option that helps all of the industries, egg layers, broilers, turkeys, etc.
Great insights, and I think that dovetails really well with what we heard from Dr. Rolls from a veterinarian's perspective in the egg space. That hey, we recognize there are all of these potential challenges. However, if we're thinking about the long term sustainability of the industry, we probably have to have this conversation in a different way than what we've had in previous outbreaks. So great insights. I want to shift away from high path, but not completely away from disease related viral challenges that maybe keep you up at night. I have been hearing more and more about avian metapneumovirus lately. You gave a great talk about it at the NTF annual convention in Scottsdale a few weeks ago. Was really glad to be able to listen to you and some of your colleagues talk about that.
Yeah.
Could you give us a quick overview of metapneumovirus and why it has become a big concern for the turkey industry? Would you give us the overview of that for folks who maybe aren't as steeped in this particular disease challenge?
Yeah, so these new serotypes, Group A and Group B of metapneumovirus, have really spread across the country and impacted the turkey industry greatly. It's not a regulated disease like foreign animal disease as high path AI is, and so there's a little bit less help from the government in that regard. So you don't get indemnity for these birds that are dying or for the farm. So there's not a lot in the indemnity piece that is the same as like high path AI,
Mhm.
and so therefore, like these farmers and companies, when these birds get sick from this virus, it weakens their immune system and it allows often bacterial infections to really go crazy and cause 100% morbidity and then really high mortality depending on like the stress factor. So that's one thing that we're seeing, that if you can keep the stress low and work through those management pieces as much as possible, you can get through the disease a little bit easier, it seems like, but some of those types of things in the turkey industry you can't really minimize. So when you move birds from brood to grow, it's a very stressful time on that bird. And so That's one thing we see mortality a lot higher around that move time just because of the stress of moving a bird. And so some of the things we can't take away fully, but trying to keep the birds as happy and healthy as possible through that disease is kind of some of the best tools we've seen.
In listening to your conversation or talking with some of our colleagues at the National Turkey Federation on some of the effort being done there, what don't we know yet about that particular virus, or what are the opportunities yet to increase our knowledge base, whether it's additional research that you might need from, say, faculty members who are listening to this at university, or research that you and your colleagues are doing at the farm level from an industry standpoint? What don't we know yet, or where are we still trying to figure out all of the ins and outs of how this particular virus and these serotypes work and how we respond accordingly?
Yeah. So some of the things that come to mind right away would be, how did this virus get over here? If it was through the wild birds, I have not heard of any information that wild birds have been testing positive for it. So it's kind of like, okay, where did it come from? And then how is it spreading? So again, if we're not finding it in the wild birds, how is it spreading from farm to farm, or, geography area to geography area, and really that spread? Because I think too, if an area ever wanted to not have to look at vaccinating, you need to know those answers of how it's spreading. And that way you can try to manage whatever it is that's spreading that virus around. Those are some areas of research and still needing to know. And then as we look at, super awesome, we've gotten back live vaccine and killed vaccine. So super excited about that. So now for our industry in the United States, very different barn setups and different environments where you're growing turkeys, and all of those things now really need to understand what's the best vaccination protocol, what's the best timing, and still need to understand the vaccination process. And, if you're dealing with both group A and group B in your area, what are the best vaccine combos? And, it just kind of opens up a whole new set of questions to try to answer.
I am fortunately surrounded by some folks on our board of directors who are themselves involved in research turkeys. But I'm wondering generally, for you as somebody who's, out in the field in the industry, focused on turkeys, are there areas where you wish you had more data, more applied solution, more research from your colleagues in faculty? This is your chance maybe to put out your wish list of things where you said, hey, I'd really love it if you all would do a little more work in this area with turkeys. Are there things like that where you would like to see more effort or support from the research community?
Obviously with high path AI and pneumovirus taking up a lot of our thought process right now. Some of the other turkey health challenges, I think that, we really could still use help with research, or different types of products to help address, would be more effective products to help control blackhead. That's kind of a disease that's out there as a protozoal disease, and really not a lot of things have been shown to help or shown to work for us. So keep more research or more products for that. Other things that cross my mind are looking at different vaccine or different options with a disease called ORT, and really that bacterial disease, trying to manage that and understand that bacterial disease as primary or secondary bacterial disease. And then also even just products to help address like Clostridial dermatitis. Again, that's kind of a disease that impacts the birds older in life, but really just more products and research on those, some of the diseases that we deal with more on, like I'd say, a day-to-day basis.
Any advice that you have for the scientific community on the kinds of research collaborations or studies that are helpful for professionals like you who are in the industry space dealing with the birds and technical service and animal welfare professionals? Any advice you have for them on how to engage industry in the research process?
I think that using some organizations would be a really good way to reach a wide number of turkey growers or turkey industry people. So such as, PSA as yourselves, or NTF, again, National Turkey Federation, using some of those partnerships between industry and research and those different organizations. I think that would be, in my opinion, some of the best ways to create some of those collaborations and working on improving communication. Because PSA and NTF, you guys kind of know your basis as well of who needs what and who would be a good place to maybe target that researcher too. And so I think that would be a great way to reach a wide range of people. And also, it kind of helps, I think, narrow down the scope on who's reaching out to which company or, which veterinarian or which producer, because there's a lot of people out there, that have products that they want to look at. And so then sometimes I would think different companies get too many products and you can't really look at them all at the same time. So I think it would be helpful to kind of navigate and know who to connect who with.
That is a perfect segue into a pitch I will make to PSA members who are attending our annual meeting this July in Raleigh, North Carolina. Thursday morning at annual meeting, put on your calendar. PSA will be hosting a roundtable discussion with the National Turkey Federation, National Chicken Council, United Egg Producers, and U.S. Poultry about exactly what you were just discussing, Dr. Cremers, the research needs of industry and the ways that members of the research community can engage with industry in exactly the way you were discussing. That'll be Thursday morning at annual meeting. You didn't even know you were going to tee that one up. That was perfect. Well done. I want to, as we shift, kind of into our final lap here of our conversation, I want to get to know you as a professional a little bit more. Like me, you have a bit of a unique journey in your career in that you started in one livestock species and are now, a key industry leader in turkey. So you started in dairy, some of your early work, obviously you're still involved in dairy at the farm level, but why poultry science and poultry medicine? How did you go from cows to the big birds?
Well, I always knew I wanted to go into food animal. Going through vet school, I just knew that food animal, growing up on a farm, like that's where I wanted to go. What I really love about poultry medicine is that it's a lot of prevention. It's not just fighting. I mean, not that you don't fight the fires once in a while, but a lot of times, especially now recently, it
Lately.
seems like it's about, your goal is prevention. Like, how do we prevent that disease? How do you work on food safety to prevent any type of issue? How do we get better? And I really enjoy that piece of poultry medicine and that type of challenging thought process and challenging yourself. Okay, how do we do this a little bit better? How do we keep improving? And that's one thing I really like about poultry medicine.
I'm thinking about the two worlds you live in, there, your day job versus, what you and your family are doing on the farm. As High Path, has moved into the mammalian species and started specifically with dairy cows, what's that been like for you kind of at the personal level, having it all around you, so to speak, day and night at home and at the office? What's been your experience there?
It's a lot of conversations with my husband, and his mom and dad still milk as well. So, just that education piece and helping them understand because they've never really been through something like this before. And so just helping them understand the clinical signs on what to watch for, and the biosecurity has really been a big discussion point too, that has, really come to the top of the conversation, and talking about how, you have a hoof trimmer coming out. What does that look like? Who's maybe gone to a couple different farms. So it's been really good and really opening up different conversations that maybe haven't always happened until this H5 has started.
Yeah.
And so then it does, create a challenge though when you work around dairy cows and then you go to work with turkeys. So it's been a little bit different with biosecurity wise for myself, just personally, but it's been managed through and so far good.
Yeah. When I was going through your bio, I thought, gosh, I feel for you. You've been you faced it on both ends, but I love that perspective because you've been able to help probably both sides of that conversation have some empathy and insight into how the other works. I want to get some more of your insights as a professional. So for, let's say, the graduate students who might be listening to us, for any early career veterinarians or early career professionals generally, what advice would you give about pursuing a career? You gave a good pitch for what's cool about poultry medicine, poultry veterinary health, but any advice you would have about pursuing a career or advancing a career in that space of poultry health and animal welfare?
I would just say go into it with no blinders on and thinking 100% what you want to work on. And then especially when you're in school yet or a graduate student, this is the chance you have to really experience everything. Once you start to work for a company, say you work for a turkey company, you're not going to get that chance to go see what a broiler operation looks like because of, biosecurity concerns, or see what different egg layer complexes are out there, like in my opinion, I think I went into vet school a little bit with blinders on, thinking I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and I missed out on some opportunities that I could have probably seen more things. So that would be my advice to anybody, would just be open to looking at different things, and you never know what might actually entice you and maybe change what you actually thought you were going to do. So I think that the poultry industry is a great place to just see the wide diversity that we have, and you never know where you might end up.
Fantastic advice. Last question. We kind of close the episode with one of a couple of consistent questions to give our guests. And this week, for you, I'd love to know one misconception about poultry science or the turkey industry that you wish more people understood.
I wish that more people purchasing poultry understood the labeling piece and understood that all meat has no residues with antibiotics, and maybe more understood the labeling piece and the antibiotics, and that nothing has hormones. And there's all these sales pitches out there, or all these animal activists that try to portray things one way and the other. And I think that that's a big misconception out there, that they still think poultry has hormones in it, or they still think, one way or the other. And I wish that that misconception could go away.
Would you like to see folks in your space more engaged in those conversations with the marketers and communicators and advertising folks?
Within my company, I do get asked on some of those questions, or when they're answering customer questions and, bringing me into the conversation. I was thinking, I get pulled into questions when I'm eating with, say, my great aunt, and I know her opinion. Like, those are the types of conversations I feel like I can make a bigger difference. Even when a poultry company tells you, exactly what you need to know, the consumer doesn't always hear that because they've heard from some outside source, and they think that outside source is more educated, and it's not. And so I think that somehow reaching the consumer, maybe through different methods, and maybe not necessarily just the poultry company selling the product themselves, but whether that's allied industry or academia, or PSA or NTF, like those types of ways, so that it's also maybe more third party almost,
Yeah.
to try to get that messaging out there.
Oh, and I love that advice, though. I used to call them mailbox conversations because I, lived in a neighborhood where a lot of times you'd go out to get the mail, and your neighbor would be at their mailbox, and you'd sit there and have chit chat. And I had a neighbor in particular that would ask me questions because I was the quote unquote ag guy. So they would hear something, in a commercial, and they'd say, "Hey, I heard about, non-GMO something or another." And your response would be like, "Well, there aren't any GMO, whatever it is that you're asking about. Like, there's never been a thing approved in that. So you don't need to worry about non-GMO water, right? It's not a thing." So I love that advice. Your influence where you are can have really big dividends. That's with great Aunt Matilda, or if that's your neighbor at the mailbox, or it's your kid's, third grade teacher. Do what you can where you are. Great advice, Dr. Cremers. Thank you very much. This has been a fantastic interview. Carrie Cremers with Jenny O, veterinarian, and great voice for what's happening in the industry, discussing opportunities to partner between the scientific and research community and the industry at large. Really, thank you for your insights, Carrie. And as Dr. Cremers alluded to earlier, great opportunity for you as a member of PSA to engage with organizations like NTF, NCC, UEP, and U.S. Poultry. This year's annual meeting in Raleigh this July. Registration is now open. I want you to join us on Thursday because there are a series of really special sessions that are going to happen on Thursday, led with that session that I referenced. But also, we're debuting a new tradition at the Poultry Science Association annual meeting and North American Scientific Conference this year. That is the Presidential Symposium, hosted by the outgoing president of PSA this year. That'll be Martin Zudoff of the University of Alberta. We'll be hosting a special symposium to cap off our scientific program. Dr. Zudoff has organized a session on precision agriculture related to the poultry industry. Got some of the best speakers and presenters in this space. A new tradition that we'll be unveiling this year. So Thursday, make sure you don't miss it. Join us for that research session that I mentioned earlier, followed by the Presidential Symposium, and then stay for our annual awards banquet, which will cap off this year's annual meeting. Also, Abstract submission is now open for the PSA Pacific Rim Scientific Conference in Macau this October. Our first scientific conference in the Pacific Rim region will be October 13th through the 16th at the Londoner Grand in Macau. Abstract submissions now open. Go to poultryscience.org to register for our annual meeting this July or to submit your abstracts for the Pacific Rim Conference this October. Next week on Unplugged, we're going to talk about from classroom to coop, teaching poultry welfare with Fresno State University professor Dr. Katie Tarrant, who is also chairman of the International Poultry Welfare Alliance. Really looking forward to that conversation with Dr. Tarrant about how we teach poultry welfare with a global impact. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to Unplugged wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Spotify, or your platform of choice. And if you thought this was a particularly useful conversation for you, give us a rating. It helps surface the podcast for other folks who might find it useful. Until next week, for the Poultry Science Association, I'm Andy Vance.